Hi everyone, welcome back and welcome if this is your first time on the stage to the CogX Hybrid Festival 2021 Startup to IPO stage. If you have been with us all afternoon, I hope you had a nice break. Over the past 18 months, I would imagine everyone here has had to learn to use at least one new office tool, whether it's Zoom and being on mute, Slack, Teams, Superhuman, or any one of a vast array of prosumer tools designed to help us collaborate effectively whilst working remotely. Our next session, The Future Workplace, Remote, Collaborative and Design-Centric, explores how the design of office tools will shape the future of the workplace, how product strategy and user testing should evolve to improve remote tools, and the importance of collaboration tools for remote working. Guiding our panel discussion is Janet Coyle, Managing Director of Business Growth at London & Partners Limited, promoting London as a hub of diversity and a great place to innovate, invest and scale businesses. Janet leads the teams in London and internationally in China, India, North America and Europe, and was previously a diplomat for the UK government working in San Francisco, Mumbai, Cape Town and Prague. Janet was also named by Computer Weekly as one of the top 20 most influential women in tech in 2020. So really looking forward to the questions you're going to be asking our panel today, Janet. Looking forward to this session. So Janet, I will hand over to you now.
Thank you, Esme, and delighted to be here. I'm a huge fan of CogX and thrilled with all the content that you've been putting on this week. Amazing. But as Esme's just said, I don't think any of us could have quite predicted the year that we've just had and foreseen how much the pandemic would have really accelerated how we've sort of changed our behaviour, how we work, how we learn, how we exercise, how we shop, how we communicate, and all the new sort of tools that we've all had to embrace and probably accelerated it years rather than months, possibly decades. So really excited about this session today, and I'm joined by two incredible innovators, business leaders, if you like, from Silicon Valley, who are going to share their perspectives on remote working, but really with a lens of those digital tools and those collaboration tools. Now, our two guests today are Rahul Vohra and Sandhya Venkatachalam. And I just want to do a very quick introduction to them both, just to sort of set the scene about their background, really. So Sandhya is a partner at Khosla Ventures and has been there for about the last 12 months, but really helping founders to transform their industries with AI and machine learning. So relevant, very relevant to CogX and everything that CogX stands for. She was previously founder and managing partner of Deep Ventures, and before becoming a VC, she's both an entrepreneur and an exec, so has lots of experience of starting, scaling businesses, selling businesses, and also acquiring startups on behalf of some of the bigger tech companies. So thrilled to have you with us today, Sandhya. And Rahul Vohra, who I've known for many years, is the founder and CEO at Superhuman. Thrilled to have you with us today. So many of you will know or heard of Superhuman if you're not using the tools yet, but it's redefining the whole email experience. And Rahul's been on quite a journey himself. So before Superhuman, he was the co-founder and CEO of Rapportive that he started when he was in Cambridge and went over to Silicon Valley and scaled it, sold it to LinkedIn, and then worked for LinkedIn for a couple of years before then going on to build Superhuman. And he's now also raised a fund himself. He's got an angel fund. He's invested in 75 companies. So I love to see that sort of pay it forward as these entrepreneurs scale and then start to invest in that next generation of startups. So thrilled you've both got so much experience to share with us today. We've got a global audience, so I'm sure we'll be getting lots of questions as well. And to our audience, please feel free to use the chat and we'll be able to come to you a little bit later with your questions. So let's just kick off initially with, from your different perspectives, I'll come to you, Sandhya, first, is what are you seeing, first of all, in terms of the trends in the remote working? Is it remote first or is it sort of hub and spoke? What are you seeing from your perspective?
Sure, and thank you, Janet, for that kind intro. So look, I think remote work is on everybody's mind. I focus and spend most of my time with really early stage entrepreneurs. And if it's not on their mind as they create or start to scale their companies, I tell them to try to actively address it. Newer companies actually, in my mind, have an advantage as they can make this decision pretty objectively and intentionally. But I also see a lot of confusion as to what does remote work actually mean, and what does it require to implement it successfully?
Yeah. So when you talk about what it actually means, what sort of advice do you give the companies then when they're starting out? Do you say, especially with the situation we're in at the moment, a lot of these new startups just all working remotely, or are they trying to find a way to get together to collaborate physically?
So I think everyone is trying different things, and this is, in a sense, part of the problem. We actually have a portfolio company called GitLab, and the founders there were one of the pioneers in terms of trying to develop methodology and best practices to make this work. And that's often antithetical to really early stage founders who don't always think about implementing process early on, and don't think about how the types and ways that they communicate, whether they can actually scale. So a couple of things that I have found to be important, and I try to pass on then to folks that I speak with, is I really believe everyone has to either be fully remote or face-to-face. As soon as you start to get even a very small hub of people who are consistently face-to-face, even if 80% or 90% of the rest of folks are remote, you start having that inequality. And so what I recommend is time-based. So at any given time, everyone is remote, but you set specific times when everyone is face-to-face. And that doesn't have to be in a headquarters. It could be at any really location of sort of their choosing, but having a cadence that is clear and specific about when everyone is remote, when people will meet face-to-face, I think is really important. And as I mentioned, I think you really need to prioritize having clear, well-understood processes. So for instance, as I mentioned, the folks at GitLab who've actually written a whole handbook about this, which I would recommend to anyone interested in the topic, they believe in documenting everything. So if it's not written, it doesn't exist. It was not a decision that was made unless it is written. And I think that this is antithetical to how many people work, and is antithetical often to how really early stage startups work that are just moving really fast. This focus on taking the time, documenting, making sure that communications are not just about stuff to do, like the daily stand-up, but also around people, understanding that you're not going to meet people in the break room and have a coffee and ask how their morning was. So you actually need to figure out ways and time to communicate with people just to build the relationship. So those are some of the things I think are important to think about.
Yeah, we'll come back to some of that actually, Sandhya. But I spoke to GitLab very recently, probably a couple of weeks ago now, who joined a similar event with us with some UK scale-ups, because their model is very interesting, and they do talk about this everyone in or everyone remote, notwithstanding a global team, which is a slightly different. But Rahul, let's bring you in on this. First of all, do you want to just say a quick overview about Superhuman? It's been incredible growth that we've been observing over the last year and before that even. But do you want to just give us a little bit of an update on where you are with Superhuman?
Sure, thank you, and hello everybody. I'm Rahul. I'm the founder and CEO of Superhuman. which if you haven't come across it, is the fastest email experience in the world. Our customers get through their email about twice as fast as before. They reply to their important email sooner, and many of them see inbox zero for the first time in years. And it's just been a really fun journey, and I'm happy to dive more into that if folks are interested. So I think the topic we have is sort of this hybrid versus remote, and what's best. How do we go into it? We have an interesting vantage point running an email client. So some things I can share aggregated across our user base. When the pandemic hit, and this hasn't changed since, even though people are starting to go back into an office, we saw email behavior change. We saw that we started sending roughly 20% more email from desktops, roughly 20% less email from our mobile devices. That overall, the amount of email that we were sending increased significantly. The amount of time that we're spending in email also increased significantly. And perhaps most concerningly, the length of our work days is quite a bit longer than it used to be. So I think there's all kinds of things to unpack there in terms of how do we, first acknowledge all of that, and then how do we actually work around it to continue to make sure that our companies are amazing places to work. And then in general, with this hybrid versus remote, I think I agree that if you can, either being fully distributed or fully face-to-face is optimal. I think the challenge that we all have, and Superhuman is very much in this camp, having started in 2014, 2015, is it's not a realistic choice for most companies that aren't starting today. We have people who, they joined us when we were a fully face-to-face company, and their whole life setup revolves around that idea. They can only really truly be their happiest and most productive if they're in a company that operates like that. We also have people, because we more than doubled the company during the course of the pandemic, who have the opposite perspective. They absolutely need a distributed company. They absolutely need to be able to work from anywhere in the world because they've oriented their life around that. And I think that's going to be the majority case. That is going to be most companies, unless you happen to be starting a company today, in which case you get the luxury of choice. So one of the biggest challenges that we face as an industry, indeed even the world of work faces, is how do we make hybrids successful? Because for most of us, it's the only realistic choice.
So what have you both seen then in the marketplace? Of course, Superhuman being one of them, I'm sure. The tools that are really solving a lot of these challenges, whether it's hybrid, whether it's remote. Certainly from a UK perspective at the moment, for those who are going in, although a lot of us are discouraged from going into offices at the moment until we're able to get to our sort of roadmap and, lessening these restrictions. But we are having to have social distance. So we can't have a full complement of staff in the office all together. So there are restrictions being placed on us, which means that we can't go fully remote and then fully all in the office. But let's think about some of the tools that you've both been seeing, obviously GitLab, Superhuman, that are really some new tools even that you're seeing that are coming onto the marketplace that are really, really transforming the way people can be more efficient, more collaborative, more communicative with each other. Sandhya?
Sure. And by the way, I fully agree that the majority of organizations out there have to figure out how to make hybrid work. So yeah. I'm in full concurrence. One interesting set of use cases, I guess, that have popped up is actually what I call sort of the unbundling of Zoom. And Zoom is this amazing sort of general tool that has helped us connect face-to-face at a time when it was most needed. But it actually encompasses many different use cases that it is not necessarily optimized for. And I think the company would be the first to sort of admit that. And so I've seen a lot of new companies and tools emerge that are trying to divide those use cases. So for instance, right now we are on Hopin because we are at a more formal event where the structure of communications and the sharing of information is different than a sales call, or different than a one-on-one meeting, or different than a collaborative session between product and engineering. And so I think the sets of asynchronous tools that enable people to not be in a physical location, the same physical location, and that do allow some people to be sort of remote, but some cluster of people to be in the same place, but equalizing the experiences so that everybody is heard, everybody is able to interact one-on-one with each other in a way that is more equal, but also is productive, right? That achieves the goals of the point of that sort of synchronous session. And so I think there's a lot of interesting things happening there, and it's pretty early. Some of it involves using video in different ways, and some of it actually involves using virtual worlds and avatars in fun ways to kind of bring that more casual and a feel of like the face-to-face environment, but to sort of a digital experience. And then on the other side of things, I see a lot more happening with both asynchronous communications to help people really communicate and describe their ideas and exchange information, obviously when they're not either physically together or actually even communicating in the same time or time zone. And part of that is an increase in sort of automated documentation and analysis of what's happening in all of these sets of communications, right? Because again, going back to, if it's not documented, it's really hard to share, especially for those who weren't able to participate. And so I think there are a lot of tools around that, whether it's emerging note-taking apps or tools, analysis tools, searching and finding relevant information in the workplace. So both around collaboration as well as productivity.
Yeah. And I mean, Rahul, Sandhya has talked a lot about lots and lots of different collaboration tools and picking some of the Zoom products. But from your perspective, do you sort of see a saturation really in the marketplace with all these different collaboration tools? Or do you think there's still space for more?
I think that it's almost both. I think that the collaboration space is very saturated. And what I mean by that is there's a ton of products, a very large number of amazing founders going after it. But we're also in the earliest innings. And the nuance is, in the last 10 years, I think we've actually seen a massive overinvestment in collaboration at the expense of real productivity. And I think this is primarily because of success stories like GitHub and Slack, which have both become obviously decacorn successes. And so many founders are chasing the dream of building that next huge collaboration tool. But I think that these tools are usually built at the expense of personal productivity. For example, if I were to show you my Slack this morning, you would see an entire page of unread channels, and each channel would contain dozens of topics all jumbled and interspersed with each other. And in a sense, that's kind of by design. It's to keep you addicted to the hamster wheel of continuously checking Slack. So what I think will happen is that over the next few years, we'll see a massive reinvestment in the core fundamentals of productivity, like email, like calendaring, like task management, but with the goal of building truly humane technology that actually makes us more productive and brilliant at what we do.
Yeah. If I could jump in, I don't think the two are actually mutually exclusive. In fact, I think while the collaboration space is very crowded and in some senses overinvested, I've been working on this problem for over 15 years, and there are continual phases of improvement, but the core problem hasn't really been solved. And I think, to your point, it's actually about bringing those things together. People often think about communication and collaborating as a separate set of things, than going and doing the work or being productive. And I think that is actually the sort of fundamental error, and also the error in how the view or the lens of how many products are actually built. The entire point of communicating and collaborating is actually to either complete actions or to make decisions. And the only way that those things can kind of come together is to have a very consistent view of information. So whether it's sort of a single person, whether it's a team, whether it's multiple teams, it doesn't matter whether the information was generated in a Notion document or in an email or email client or in a synchronous Zoom meeting. It should the information and the data should sort of all be treated consistently and living in sort of I would say a continuous and consistent format, which anyone can access at any time. So I don't actually think the two are mutually exclusive. I do.
Would you say, from what you're saying, Sandhya, that sounds it's the same whether you're in a physical space, to be fair, or remote. I mean, what you're talking about there, whether it's single or whether it's as a team, because a lot of people have been...
Absolutely. I don't think it has anything to do with where you are. I also don't think there should be such a huge difference between when I'm working at personal productivity in a sense, or when I'm communicating or working with others. The information flow should be relatively seamless. And I think that's what's really sort of missing in the market today is bringing all those things together. I have a personal view that with the sort of proliferation of data and machine learning to help aid in some of those tasks, that there's real opportunity, and I don't actually see that many entrepreneurs fully taking advantage of it. So I actually think there is white space.
And what about when you're thinking about the white space and what's being developed next? Are you both seeing a difference in sort of the way businesses are approaching product strategy and user testing in the virtual world that we're all working in? Are you finding it different, Rahul, in terms of Superhuman and how you're doing your user testing?
We are, and this goes back to the fact that hybrid is just the realistic outcome for most companies. Some people are always going to be in the office, some will always be remote, some people will go between the two. And that calls for very different software, I think, to a world where everyone is remote or everyone is together. Yeah. And a simple example is if you've ever tried to do a hybrid video call, then you'll know what I mean. You have some people in the same room, some people remote. Imagine you're in that room. Now, where do you look? How do you ensure everybody sounds good? How do you actually address everybody as an equal? And with most of today's technology, that's all quite awkward. So I think there's a huge opportunity for people starting out today or companies looking to the future to specifically tackle the hybrid problem.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring a question in as well. Oh, Sandhya, do you want to come in on that at all in terms of...
I fully agree. And Rahul would definitely have a better view about how product and user testing have evolved in this environment than I certainly would, but I fully agree.
Excellent. I'm just going to bring in one from Sachin in the audience who says that the problem with everyone in, going back to this conversation about everyone in or everyone remote, is that it requires the workspace to be scaled for maximum occupancy, which is what we touched on earlier. Some companies actually want to save money on space. So how do you see this working, and I wonder what GitLab are doing in that space?
Yeah, so when I said everyone in, it doesn't have to be in the office. So this is why I think it just has to be intentional and in the sense planned well. When you want to have everyone together, there are enough options for ad hoc working space or event space, or it could actually be really unstructured space. So I absolutely do not advocate a centralized headquarters scaling infinitely with everyone in. This is where I think people have this mindset of when face-to-face means in the office, meaning in like a headquarters type office. And I think that has to evolve and change as well.
Yeah, and Satch is again commenting, people physically present tend to dominate in hybrid meetings. Yeah, I tend to agree there. Collaboration, how do we manage human dynamics? so that being virtually present doesn't disadvantage these people. And just to add to Sachin's comment, I've been reading articles about how in the future we've got to be really careful that we don't disadvantage women. We've been working so hard on inclusivity and equality. And if we all go to this hybrid model, where for various reasons, as we know, women might choose to work more remotely, and their counterparts in the office are being more visible, presenting, dominating, to Sachin's point. So do you have any thoughts on that, is how we can actually prevent that from happening in a hybrid world? And either of you, Rahul?
Yeah.
Also,
so I'll just jump in quickly. So I don't think anyone's solved it. What I've seen with some really great entrepreneurs who are trying to tackle this is actually also trying to use digital devices more when people are face-to-face. And this might seem counterintuitive, but if everybody is voting, for instance, or commenting on a poll via their mobile device, even if I'm sitting, next to 5 or 6 people, physically, or if people are sort of raising their hand digitally, there's some ways to try to equalize that. I think it's a really big problem, but perhaps there are, digital tools that could be used even in that physical location to kind of equalize it.
I can also give my 2 cents there if you want.
Please.
So these are just some simple ideas, and I'll also name tools that we use to help. One simple idea, and this is a formula that many founders I see using, is even if you have people together in a room, create the social convention that everyone's expected to be on their laptop and addressing their machine. And that kind of equalizes, not 100%, but sort of, the difference between being physically there and not being physically there. On top of that, some tools that we've used to good effect, or we're still testing. One is a really great company called Rewatch. Rewatch is taking the vast amount of video that almost all companies are now generating, whether it's all hands or one-on-ones or team meetings, what have you, and then creating a central library. Imagine a YouTube for your company, but where the videos are fully transcribed and searchable. And we found that to be super effective. Another one that we've used is a company called Room, R-U-M-E. This is really for fun. It's sort of to hang out in like you can imagine it's Google Meet, but you have fun games that you can play, you have music, and different people can DJ. So we use that for our happy hours in a remote setting. We have another one called Descript, which is like basically Google Docs for audio/video. We use this for all of our media production, and it makes you, it kind of replicates the feeling of being next to somebody, editing a video with them, which is usually a very tactile, interactive experience, but you can now do that remotely. And so those are just some examples of tools that we use that have kind of, that seek to equalize this difference a little bit.
Yeah, there's some great tools there. As you say, there's so many different tools for different needs, and the challenge will be is just bringing it all together, as we've said before. Can I just touch a little bit about sort of product design? Probably back to you, Rahul, to start with. Is it's a very hot topic at the moment, and what do you see in terms of any shifts in trends in product design as we're looking at that future workplace, that we're looking at remote and hybrid? Do you think design is still very sort of central as these startups are building out new products?
Yes, I think so. In general, design takes a forefront when you're entering a space that's dominated by incumbents. If you aren't, let's say, if you're entering a completely greenfield new space, design may not actually matter that much, because the value proposition of what you have, even if it's really unpolished, maybe it's half complete, is still so compelling because there's literally nothing else that you can do. That used to be the traditional startup, the greenfield land and grab, but it's increasingly no longer the case. Increasingly, and Superhuman is a great example where if you're not using Superhuman, you're either using Gmail or Outlook, you really do have to build something that is fundamentally designed better, both visually and aesthetically, as well as fundamentally from an interaction design perspective. And most founders going after collaboration, communication, and the future of work are now facing that challenge. And the upside is, if you're a great designer, you're now one of the most important people to be on a founding team.
Incredible. Yeah, so that are great perspectives there. And Sandhya, from your perspective, are you seeing the same? I know you do a lot with AI and machine learning, but you're very much in this sort of collaboration space in terms of businesses that you're investing in. So would you say design is still very central?
I do like Rahul's delineation, and I think that a lot of AI first companies actually fall into this category of being not necessarily completely new in a greenfield space, but offering a fundamentally different value proposition, and therefore the ostensible design may not be as relevant. I think also not all products, especially those that are driven by data and machine learning, are actually completely end user facing. A lot of the value is in the analysis and the insights. And so the design actually becomes around how do you intelligently and seamlessly integrate those aspects of the value into what users are already doing today. So design takes on a different angle, which is often around integrating where people are already working or using other tools. I also just think that design doesn't stop with the actual user interface. I think even the ability to go and try a product quickly, be onboarded quickly, and use it in a way that doesn't getting really quick sort of time to value. These are all aspects now of design that I think are really important, but aren't just about how appealing or delightful the UI is. So just some other things to think about.
I suppose, yeah, again, I was really interested in what Rahul said earlier about the 20% increase in email from desktop versus mobile. I feel that I'm using both 24/7 at the moment, but it's a good point. So yeah, it's that integration as well with the user testing and the design, as you say, and the efficiency of all these tools, isn't it? I mean, another question that's come in from the audience: most managers have grown up in that physical enterprise, that physical space, have developed styles accordingly. Going virtual changes what we need from managers. How do we execute that change? And what are you seeing in terms of any training or behavioral training that's being done with managers to make sure that they're embracing this change that we're all experiencing? Have you seen that with any of your businesses, Sandhya?
For sure, later stage companies in our portfolio have absolutely had to address this. As we've talked about here, if you're not sort of starting from scratch or not early on, this is a reality for most organizations. So I do think that proactively addressing these concerns and having strategic conversations about what do we want to be, what are our values. John, similar to what you said, as we move forward now, we want to make sure that we are inclusive, we are sensitive, and I hope everyone has gained more sensitivity to the fact that each of us are actually whole humans, right? Not just professionals at work, but we have lives that sort of get in the way. So all of these things, I hope, are actually some of the icing or some of the positives that will come out of this period. It has to be a proactive discussion, and absolutely training, if sort of required, should be embraced and not, regarded as something secondary. We definitely are doing it.
It's like what you were talking about earlier, Sandhya, when you were talking about having to sort of be very consciously thinking about, you can't meet someone at the tea, making coffee or tea, whatever. You have to actually put extra time in to communicate more and almost over communicate. But I'm also interested to hear from both of you. I know we've got a few minutes left. Given that, Rahul, you're now an angel investor and you're with a very prominent VC with Khosla Ventures, Sandhya. Many people on this call today at this event may be wanting to start a new business in that white space that we talked about earlier, possibly a new collaboration tool. Given that you're now meeting a lot of them via Zoom or in other ways of communicating, what are the tips that you can give them in terms of getting their message across to you to get your interest? Because I'm sure you've been investing in businesses in this virtual world without having that face-to-face. Are there any sort of tips that you're happy to share? Rahul, I'll go to you first.
Sure. So I can start with the general tips that apply to pitching any investor, and then perhaps some specific ones for this space. Generally, what most investors want to see is that you are incredible, that you deeply and intimately understand the space, that you obsess over it, that you exhibit grit and resilience and passion and perseverance. This, by the way, all applies at the earliest pre-seed seed stage. Later on, of course, you actually have to have a great product, and later than that, great metrics. But at the earliest stage, it's really about, are you incredible and are you the right person in the world to start this company? That's sort of part one. Part two is, can you tell a compelling story to let's say, $1 billion outcome? Now, most investors are actually looking for even more than that. But at the earliest stage, if you can tell a story for $1 billion outcome, then you're already better than the vast majority of people pitching. And usually when we pass on a company, it's not usually because of the lack of grit or resilience, but it's because there isn't a well thought through path to really big enterprise value. So that's just general pitching advice. Specifically for productivity and collaboration, I would say just be cognizant and aware and acknowledge whether you're going after incumbents or you're building a new thing. Tweak your strategy accordingly. If you're going after incumbents, like I said, design of all different kinds is super important. If you're not, it's less important. Make sure that models into your go-to-market and distribution strategy, and be really thoughtful about both business model and single player versus multiplayer. So it's a longer conversation, but in summary, single player is a really good way to start, because you don't need the person who's adopting your product to convince anybody else to use it in order for them to start to get value. But in order to scale revenue retention, unless you end up really lucky, like a Spotify or a Netflix, or like what we're able to do, it's quite hard to retain that revenue. And so there's this strategic jump that most productivity collaboration tools have to make, which is that jump from single player to multiplayer and finally straddling that line.
Yeah, really important, especially these collaboration tools. Anything you want to add, Sandhya, particularly in this remote world? What's really caught your attention on a Zoom call?
So I love everything that Rahul advocated. Just a few other thoughts in addition, because it is all about you, actually for quite a long time, even when you have a product and it's a great product, because most investors want to invest for the long term and they want to invest and help you build really large transformational companies, which is a very long journey.
Yeah.
Please be authentic. I want to understand, and I think many others do, who you are. Why are you doing this? What do you believe? What are you great at? What aren't you great at? And it's okay not to be good at everything, because then that helps us together construct who's the right team. How can we help? Who are other partners who could help? So this is a mutual discovery process, not a sales process. And I think that to achieve the best outcome for you, the entrepreneur, as well as finding the right partner, being authentic is even more important, I guess, on Zoom, because on Zoom or on video, you tend to just do the pitch, right? It's a little bit more structured versus that even small chatting, getting to know you bit up front or after. And then, echoing Rahul, think big. Think as big as you possibly can. Think of the ideal.
Yeah.
And then, understandably, tell us what you've done and how you get from what you've done to that ideal, to that, really big idea. And yes, the chances that we all get there together are small, but we need to know it's possible, and we need to know that that is what you are going after. Because if you're not going after it from the beginning and you're not passionate and ambitious about it, it's for sure never going to happen.
Absolutely.
And then just super tactically, just to add one more thing to what Rahul said, please be aware of competition and think about competition broadly. So not the company or tool that is directly overlapping with the exact value proposition or functionality that you offer today, but think in terms of how your users spend their time and spend their money, and think of that as competition, and how you position, sort of against that or versus that. I think that I've seen increasingly a disdain for understanding the competitive environment, and that puts the onus on me, and that's fine, but it should be something you think of in your everyday work as you build your product and company.
Wow, they were just such valuable tips there. I'm scribbling away. I'm not going to have time to summarize all of it, and we are out of time, I'm afraid. I'm going to hand back over very, very shortly. But I mean, just, great tips there. Be aware, be authentic, be ambitious. It's all about building that relationship, isn't it? Even over Zoom or over Hopin. So I hope we're all maximizing the networking at CogX, because they've certainly allowed plenty of opportunity there. I can't wait till we can have these avatars and I can go into a virtual room and have a nice conversation with you both, just informally. But thank you so much to Sandhya and to Rahul. It's been an absolute pleasure. I could talk for hours on this topic, but also to both of you. Really appreciate all your experience. We'd love to welcome you over here to London in person when you're able to travel over here. But thank you on behalf of myself, but also on behalf of CogX.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.